Hello everybody, this is Albert. A few weeks back I made a response video to another user dealing with a comparison between the NIV and the King James Version. Now, I mentioned was a big NIV fan, but the comparisons which were basically, they were pretty much based on King James onlyism, were just completely fallacious, and I pointed that out. Now, today I've had a response to that video, and then I was kind of curious because what happened was originally the user JLS201, I received an email saying you've gotten a response to this video, and I clicked to, I got the message in my email, I clicked, went to the video, went to the page for the responses to approve it, and it wasn't there. So I contacted him to let him know that whatever you were sending me, it's not there. And I didn't know what had happened. This has happened with me in response videos before, so I usually do contact the person and say, send it again, and he did, and this time I took a look at it. He responded to me with a KENT HOVInd video. Now, I really am not sure why anyone would respond to anything with a KENT HOVInd video. I can't imagine using KENT HOVInd as an authority on anything. Certainly not church history or textual criticism, and definitely not tax law, but he used this as a response. And I've seen this video before, and it's completely, it becomes very painfully obvious he knows absolutely nothing. But I'm going to run through, and I don't have time to go through every single error in this video, so I'm just going to highlight the big ones, and you can take a look at the video, and I'll give you a rough appearance of where it's so you can sort of get the gist. And what happens is he kind of starts off slowly, but then the errors start coming so fast and furious, it's really hard to keep up with them. But I'm going to, give you a rough time period when they occur. About 40 seconds in, he starts talking about how it takes 10 months it took the ancient the first century Christians or so 10 months to make a copy of the Bible. Well, they didn't make copies of the Bible. Things were originally in scrolls, so they would make copies of individual books. That's simply not how things work. You didn't make a copy of the Bible. They didn't have the sort of books we have now. They were originally in scrolls. Later they went in codices, and even when they had codices, what you will find in 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, and for the most part, you might get a collection of the Gospels. You get a collection of Paul's letters. You get a collection of other stuff. But you don't get the entire New Testament together. And similarly with the Old Testament, they're broken up into sections. You generally don't get a whole the Bible. People don't walk around with. And in fact, about a minute or so, and he then goes into this assumption that if somebody made a mistake, they would destroy it. They would destroy everything. And so he's right away assuming he would talk about them burning it. What he's doing, he's getting into this whole sort of ritual Masoretic text type process, but that doesn't occur first of all, it's in Judaism, not Christianity, and it doesn't occur for centuries to come. And that's something that arises in the late medieval era. So there's no evidence that any Christians ever did that. I mean, it's just not the way it was done. The material was just too valuable, because generally all they had to do was, with a lot of the material they were using, to scrape it and then write over it. So no, that isn't what they did. Then about minute 15 or so in it, he sort of gets into at various points, and I'm not sure if because he just sort of assumes it, although he doesn't really state it. He has this impression that people are just walking around like, you took your copy of the Bible and went, no. They didn't have copies of the Bible. Generally, the Christians, if the scrolls or later the codices would generally be in the location where they worshipped. It was not in the possession of the average Christian. That's not how it went. And it becomes painfully obvious he knows absolutely nothing about the history of that period. He also said, about 2 minutes and 45 seconds in, is under this impression that the manuscripts, all of them were exact copies. Well, if you've taken long manuscripts and hand copied them, there's no such thing as an exact copy, okay? It just didn't happen that way. And particularly in a group that's under persecution, as they were at that time, you copied as fast as, basically you didn't have the time for that sort of formal process. It just wasn't part of the equation. And to think, and in fact, you take the manuscripts then, there's, from any of those periods, they're not exact copies. None of them. Okay, so that's just absurd. Then, about 2 minutes and 55 seconds, he suddenly segues into the 16th century. I don't know either. Okay, but let's run with it. About 2 minutes 55 seconds or so into the video, he starts then talking about how they started making copies of translating the Bible into English, and how Erasmus and Luther and Tyndale decided that were helping put the Bible into English. Well, Tyndale, I'll grant you, but Erasmus and Luther didn't speak English. Erasmus took Greek manuscripts and translated them into Latin. Basically, they had their Latin manuscripts, but he got Greek manuscripts and pretty much was making a critical Greek edition of the text, and then translating that into Latin. And that's what Erasmus did. He never worked with English. Luther took Erasmus's second edition and translated it into German. Again, nothing to do with English. I mean, that's just so bizarre. But he's talking about then when they're like getting these manuscripts together, they got 5,000 manuscripts from all over the world. What? Where is he getting this? First of all, in terms of Greek manuscripts, which is what we're speaking of Erasmus in the Textus Receptus strictly applies to the New Testament, number one. Erasmus basically got whatever Greek manuscripts he had on hand, and then wrote a few other people for corrected versions of verses that his manuscripts he wasn't sure about. So we're talking Erasmus's base manuscripts, we're talking 6, not 5,000. 5,000 is kind of a number of manuscripts we might have today, but from that early period. But no, there's no 5,000 manuscripts they had back. That's completely ridiculous. 5,000, and they weren't scrolls also, but they were codices. They were, in various forms. And the ones Erasmus was working with were all very, very late. Earliest were from about the 10th century, so they were extremely late. They were Greek manuscripts from Western Europe. They generally were not what you call in pristine condition. They were not good manuscripts. They were what they had, because the best Greek manuscripts would have been in the Christian East, where they actually spoke Greek. He then talks about this group of manuscripts that they had available that they were known as the Textus Receptus. Now, Erasmus's critical edition, because he had to take these half a dozen manuscripts and letters he got from other people, and from that collate a critical Greek edition, because the manuscripts weren't in agreement with each other. And in many places, he didn't even have a good manuscript. And certain parts, for example, the book of Revelation, he reverse engineered the Latin Vulgate into Greek to complete the text. So, no. Okay. Then he says there were no differences in the text. Are you out of your mind? Sorry, Kent, but there were lots and lots. That's why he kept writing people saying, hey, what does this say in your manuscript? Because there were tons of differences in the text. Then he talks about this being majority text. It's not the majority text, or it's sometimes called the Byzantine. The Byzantine text, or the Byzantine textual tradition, is a tradition of manuscripts that centered in and around Constantinople, basically used by the Eastern Orthodox Church, that developed over those in the East, in the Christian East, and that's the majority, because that was the majority around at this period. It would have been called the majority text, but that was not the Textus Receptus were derived from those, but they were peculiar versions of those that were, because the Byzantine texts did not all agree. They all disagreed with each other on an average 5 or 6 places per chapter per book. Now, a lot of these were just minor things, like the misspellings and that sort of thing, but there were differences in the text. Don't even kid yourself that there weren't, okay, in the Byzantine text. And generally, the ones in Western Europe were the least accurate of them. So that's what Erasmus was working with. It was not the majority text. Because of the YouTube time limit, I'm going to break it up into 2 parts, and I'll finish with the rest of this discussion next time, and I hope to see you then. Thank you very much for your time.